say Chinese food, that literally excite brain cells to death. They're called excitotoxins. And in this next clip, Dr. Russell Blaylock, who is a neurosurgeon and a scientist, describes the role of glutamate in producing and feeding cancer.
Well, MSG is monosodium glutamate. It's just a salt of glutamate. The damaging element is the glutamate, not the monosodium. You forget that. Anything that says glutamate is an excitotoxin. That means it can destroy brain cells. Now, when I did most of my research and writing about excitotoxins, it had to do with the brain, because that's where we thought all the glutamate receptors were. Now we found out that actually there's glutamate receptors in every cell in the body. A single cell doesn't have glutamate receptors. What that means is, if you eat glutamate, now you don't have a blood-brain barrier to even consider protecting you, because glutamate goes to all these cells without any interference. And your blood level rises very rapidly and very high over a prolonged period of time. Humans have a higher and more persisting level of glutamate in their blood than any animal that you experiment on. Well, the second thing, once they found out there are glutamate receptors everywhere, is they found out glutamate receptors trigger and stimulate the growth and invasion of cancers of every kind. First they thought it was brain tumors only, and they demonstrated that if you had high glutamate levels around the tumor became highly invasive and grew twice as fast as a tumor that had low glutamate levels. Then they started looking at other tumors, lung tumors, colon cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, thyroid cancers. They looked, every cancer they looked at, they found the same thing. Glutamate acted as a fertilizer, if you will, a stimulant for the growth of that cancer. Made it grow extremely fast, made it highly invasive, and less likely to be cured. Now, the researchers continued, and we're finding that more and more. Now, the second corollary is that if you block the glutamate receptor, the tumor starts slowing its growth. It becomes less invasive. And the tumors will start dying, the cells start dying. It has no effect, negative effect on normal cells. So if you block the glutamate, normal cells reproduce, function just fine. It's only the cancer cell that starts dying when you start blocking the glutamate receptors. And then they found, well, if you take a patient who's getting chemotherapy and you give them these glutamate blockers, the chemotherapy works a lot better.
Wow, so you can take it along with
the chemo. Take it along with it.
Because I know a lot of people that are watching are on chemo now.
Right. And so this is a really hot area of research. The big question is, you don't want to block all glutamate receptors because the brain needs them for its function. You wouldn't be able to remember, you fall into a coma. So you want to do a selective way to cut down that glutamate production. Well, there's an enzyme in your cells called glutamates, and its function is to convert glutamine into glutamate. And that's how that cancer cell starts producing lots of glutamate. And if you block that enzyme, the tumor starts shrinking.
Are there natural glutamate blockers that we should be familiar with?
Fortunately, there's a lot of them.
Okay.
Virtually all your flavonoids that I've discussed, curcumin, quercetin, ellagic acid, resveratrol, anthocyanins, they all reduce glutamate receptor activity. And that's their advantage. And they do it safely, so that the brain can function normally, but the cancer can't use it.
Fascinating information from Dr. Blaylock that glutamate actually acts as a fertilizer for cancer cells. And I thought it was really interesting what he said. It's not the monosodium. Most people have heard of MSG, monosodium glutamate. It's not the monosodium part that's the problem. It's the glutamate. And there's many different types of glutamate. Let's listen to some more from Dr. Blaylock as he shares.
Cancer cells use two major fuels. Okay. They use glucose and they use glutamine. Of the two, sugar, glutamine is the more powerful stimulant for cancer cell growth.
Okay.
And
so we hear that, watch out for sugar, glucose, because cancer cells do feed on it, but you're saying glutamine is worse.
Yeah, because, the Warburg effect is the fact that normal cells use both anaerobic and aerobic system, the Krebs cycle. Cancer cells only use the anaerobic system. They were stalled. Glutamine can work the aerobic system and produce a lot more energy. So if you eat a lot of sugar and you eat a lot of glutamine, you're really stimulating your cancer powerfully. And so the idea is you want to cut down on your glutamine intake. Well, a lot of people are promoting glutamine as a way to heal the gut, leaky gut syndrome. And so they're saying take 5, 6, 10 grams of glutamine. That is a powerful stimulant for degenerative brain disorders, a powerful stimulant for cancer growth. So you don't want to do that. There's a lot better ways to repair the GI tract that work better and safer and actually inhibit cancer.
But not glutamine.
But not glutamine. The other thing is foods, for instance, beans like black beans are high in glutamine. Mushrooms are high in glutamine. So these foods that are high in glutamine, you don't want to eat either. You want to try to eat only low glutamine foods, and a lot of those are your vegetables. And some cancer researchers think, well, this may be why people who are on vegetarian diets and juicing seem to have these spontaneous cures of their cancer, is because they have such a low glutamine intake and a low sugar intake.
Wow.
Both.
So getting rid of the two fuels.
You're getting rid of two fuels. Now, cancer cannot use fat for its fuel. So coconut oil is a good way to keep your energy up without having to resort to sugar, and cancer can't use it.
MSG is one form of glutamate. What are some other sources of glutamate to avoid?
Well, the industry, really got hammered when my book Excitotoxins came out, and everybody was looking at glutamate, and so they started taking MSG off the label, and they even put on the label, contains no MSG. And then they put sources of glutamate in it, like hydrolyzed protein, soy protein isolate, soy protein concentrate, autolyzed yeast, caseinate is a very common one. All of those are extremely high in glutamate, but the law allows them to put those in the food and still put on the label contains no MSG.
Because they're not monosodium
They're
glutamate.
not monosodium glutamate,
Okay.
but they're just as dangerous and harmful as monosodium glutamate.
So you're going to watch out for all the forms of glutamate.
All the forms of glutamate, and particularly soy. Soy is naturally high in glutamate and glutamine, as well as aluminum and fluoride and manganese.
Wow.
There's a lot of toxins in it. Soy is a very bad food, and particularly a liquid food. If you get milk and soy liquid products, it's very high glutamate levels. Your blood level will rise as much as 20-fold to 50-fold.
And that's even if it's organic soy,
It
right?
doesn't make any difference. It's natural to the plant. And in my estimation, people shouldn't be consuming soy products.
Dr. Blaylock mentioned that glutamate is not only a fuel, but it's also a fertilizer for cancer cells. Now, when you hear fuel for cancer, most people who have been paying attention thus far in the series are going to say sugar. And sugar is something that we must address. Sugar is one of the primary fuels for cancer. In this next clip, we listen to a scientist describe what we need to really look out for when it comes to sugar. Are all sugars bad? Or are there certain things that we need to look for as far as sugar is concerned? Potentially the spikes of sugar, the glycemic index. What is it that we need to look out for in order to avoid sugar fueling